unique company that focuses on helping to bring out God's best in leaders at work and at home. He is a business owner, mentor, and coach. He has worked with executives and managers in leading companies across North America and beyond. Pete serves on the national leadership team for the Navigators of Canada. He and his wife Kathy have been mentoring and discipling men and women for over 30 years. Knowing Peter as a friend, the fact that we share the same office space once in a while, which is actually Starbucks downtown Guelph, I have learned that Peter has had the very unique privilege of mentoring his future son-in-laws. I'm not sure of all of them, but certainly a couple of them. And in one case, led them to the Lord first, and then mentored them, and then they married his daughter. So amazing story. They really enjoy hanging out with their 4 grown kids, their spouses, and growing families. They live in Guelph, Ontario for now. Our brother has his hands in many, many different pots, so to speak. In other words, he has influence in many different realms. It's a real privilege to introduce him, a mentor and man of God for sure. Let's give a hand to Peter Kuehni, please.
Well, good morning. We can probably do a little bit better than that. Good morning. Good morning. It is really, really good to be here. Jim and I were chatting out in the foyer, and I go, you know what, introductions are always a little bit weird, aren't they? You go, you wonder, who are they talking about? And yet I suppose it is part of the story, so it is a real pleasure to be here. It's always a little peculiar for me because many of you sit here with many letters behind your names. And I sit here with a degree in animal science, genetics and nutrition. And I kind of go, okay, God, you have a real sense of humor because you've got this dude up here at the front. And long time ago when the earth was still green, I had this passion to go into the ministry, at least that's how I thought it to be. And through the 80s, and in the early 80s, I became a Christ follower through the ministry of the Navigators at the University of Guelph. And as God began to shape himself in me over time, I had this passion for ministry, but never the freedom to move into vocational ministry. And God began to shape how I viewed the world, along with one of my business partners today, Chip Robinson. And the passion and the prayer of us over 30 years is that, God, you would use us as your men out there to expand and advance the gospel of Jesus and his kingdom. And that has been my calling for over 30 years. Discipling generations of laborers into the nations and the 7 sectors. Ken, thank you for that. I said to Ken at break, I said, you know what, Ken? My soul sang when you spoke this morning. And what I'm welcoming so richly today is the invitation for the layperson to be a part of the story with you. Because that hasn't always been the case. And over the years, if you ever wanted to get the hair standing up on the back of my neck, have an individual, though well-intended, and I understand that, give a call to full-time Christian work. And I would sit in the audience and go, Father, what about me? Interesting question, isn't it? What about me? So today, I want to share some stories with you. Because as I've been on my journey, my sweetheart and I, we have 32 years of marriage coming up next week. Amen to that. As Brady and I were chatting, Brady Wilson and I were dear friends. We've been journeying together in the world of business and ministry for a long time. And when I saw Brady's name on there, not that I had said no to Jim's invite, but I was really excited when I saw Brady and Jim. Right, Jim? Does that work? And so as we're moving through this, one of the questions that has haunted me in a healthy way, how do I go the distance? As a minister of the gospel, committed to being a part of God's story and seeing his kingdom advance in the sphere and the context in which he has me. How does a dude, a beef farmer's son from Northern Ontario, who happened to get some extra academic education at the University of Guelph, Jesus finds him, how does he participate in what God is doing, and how does he finish well? That question has been haunting me for 36 years since I came to faith. And I want to share with you today 5 habits, and there are many others, but 5 that have become really clear to me, and I want to share those with you. And as I go through each one, I have a little evaluation for you just to pause and reflect. How am I doing in that habit? And in setting this up, I want to set it up with a piece, and Brady is quite familiar with this word. And so in setting this up, I want you to stand up. I want you to greet one another, just briefly, as if you're absolutely uninterested in seeing that this dude from the front asked you to do so. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, very good. We can stop the, thank you for that. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to now greet one another. I now want you to greet one another as if they are a long lost friend. You have not seen them in 30 years and you're over the moon excited. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Take your seats. Take your seats. All right. Thank you very much. Take your seats, please. I felt like I was on Sunday morning and we gave permission for them to move around the room and bless everybody. What was the difference between the two? If you were to pick one word, energy. And if there's anything that has grieved my heart over the years, is the wash of God's men and women over time, and you see energy fading and the excitement of the kingdom fading. And as I look at it, I go, Father, what has to happen to us? One of the things that I enjoy doing often is travel. I used to travel much on the business side. Not so much anymore. Business is much more local. And when I do, or with our family, what's one of the ways that we would discover where a great breakfast spot would be? What would you look for in the parking lot? Lots of trucks and cars just packed out, right? Okay, there's a good spot. That's the one that we want to go to. You go inside, and if you're in the deep south, the server would come up to your table and say, hey, how y'all doing? And then you would say something, you're not from around here, are you? She would say. How would she know? Because we spoke differently. There was something about us where the response was, you're not from around here. And I look at it in Christendom and the invitation of our King, should that not be the response of those around us? Wow, you're not from around here, are you? And what has to happen in order for that response? John 13, 34 and 35. A new commandment I give you. Love one another. As I have, so you must love one another. All men will know that you're my disciples because of your love for one another. And when they see that, what question are they saying? Man, you're not from around here, are you? The kingdom of God washing, moving, changing, calling. The response from people around us, you're not from around here, are you? So I take a look at that. I take a look at stress stats from the American Psychological Association. Just quickly here. 77% of Americans, physical symptoms from stress. 73% psychological symptoms. 33% extreme. 48, 1 and 2, increased in the last 5 years. These are 2014. 76, 3/4, money and work. 1 and 2, lying awake at night, can't sleep. Isn't that an opportunity for the kingdom? Isn't that an opportunity for the gospel to impact the lives of people? I shared this with Jim yesterday as I saw him at my office, Starbucks downtown Guelph. And I said, Jim, I came across some stats that saddened my heart. And today I'm speaking to those who vocationally have been called to ministry. And I came across these stats because I was wondering, what does this look like in the pastorate, in the vocational side of the Christian world? 80% feel that ministry has negatively affected their families. 95% of pastors don't pray with their spouse. 1 in 3, ministry is an outright hazard. 70% fight depression. 70% lower self-image now than when they had when they went into the ministry. 70% wish they could have a close friend. 1 in 3 have an inappropriate sexual relationship with somebody in the church. And I go, Father, what does that do to your heart when you see that? And this is from the Fuller Institute, Barna, Pastoral Care, Inc. You and I might choose to argue the numbers. I suggest the trend is there. And I go, Father, what is happening? Now, I typically bring this message to the business community. And today I'm bringing it to you, inviting you with great, great grace, offering you some truths that Jesus has implanted in me, and I sit in the chair with you. Father, may this be different. May it be so. I love how Peterson renders it in the message, as Ken was teaching this morning. Salt, light, God color, God flavor. That is the call of the kingdom citizen. And then I come across and go, Father, what is happening? When I look at these numbers, something is going woefully wrong. Would you agree? And I'm inviting us as men and women of the King, shoulder to shoulder, me with you, speakers with you, leaders with you, to say enough. And to put some habits in place that allow the energy of the King to infuse our souls, our will, our mind of thought and feeling, our body, and the experience of the context that God has us in, our souls. And that is my invitation to you today, because that is not the kingdom way. And yet, how often do we hear the words burnout? Henry Nouwen has some pointed messages for us. I was living in a very dark place, and the term burnout was a convenient psychological translation for spiritual death. Challenges me, maybe challenges you. I suggest, Houston, we have a problem. What does that look like? Because we long for this, don't we? How many would, oh, yeah, Pete, that'd be great. Can I just go there now? Anybody? But that's what we experience. Oh my gosh, Monday morning. Or maybe, Sunday morning. Wrong audience. I was speaking to a group of 500 full-time Christian workers. And I stood on the stage just like this. And it happened to be a Wednesday morning. And so I threw it, I said, what day is this? No, seriously, what day is it? And they yelled out Wednesday morning. I said, great. Now in the corporate world, what do we love about Wednesdays? Hump day, see, we get it, don't we? And I said, and we love hump day because what is coming right around the corner? Now again, your context is a little bit different, I get that. And so as I was listening to them, I go, wow, what happened to Lamentations 3:22 and 23? Because of the Lord's great love. Pete Kuehni is not consumed. Ken Miles is not consumed. Brady Wilson, not consumed. First compassions, they're new. What happened to Monday morning? What happened to Sunday morning? Why is it not beautiful in our thinking? How can we wish time away? We long for this. Oh, roots going deep, Jeremiah 17. Oh, it feels like this. I suggest something's going woefully wrong. I say we need to have courage to be the men and women and to live in the way that he has invited us to be, to do what is right in the face of fear. But I'm not talking about this, although I really like this. And in fact, I don't know if I've ever shared, I don't know if you've been in my home recently. I have a 3/4 replica of the Claymore, the William Wallace sword. So I really like this. But this is not what I'm talking about. What does it look like to have courage that takes us and we go the distance? Well, this came home for me in the spring of 1998. And I had enjoyed just a wonderful career in the agriculture sector in the world of livestock genetics. Things had gone well. This is prior to me just beginning to work with Brady at another company where we first met. And in that process, God met me in a way that I had not met him before. I just had it out with one of my kids. We have 4 kids that are now 30, 28, 26, and 24, all married. Our 8th grandchild is on the way. Yeah, it's phenomenal. And I just had it out with one of them. Came downstairs, and I don't even remember which one. Came downstairs, and I stood in front of the window looking out into the backyard, and I broke. And the tears just flowed, and I remember saying, Father, I can't do this anymore. And I was like, whoosh. Things became clear to me. Have you ever had those moments? And all of a sudden I remembered the lens with which I was viewing my wife and my kids was how I grew up. With deep care and love and affection for my parents who are still alive. But I grew up in a deeply performance-driven world. And God got a hold of me that day. Not that he's done today. But I realized that, and I'm not great at math, and theologically, help me out here if I'm not on base, but let me test it. Last time I checked, Genesis 1 comes before Genesis 3. Am I okay there? Imago Dei. Image bearers. But I was seeing them as toil. Work. Fix them. Make it right. Correct. That's what we do. And God, I had the numbers inverted. I was seeing Genesis 3. That's the window through which I saw my family. And he turned that around for me. What do you see first? How's your math? Because if you do not get that, the rest will not make sense. How's your math? So read this with me all together. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings out the best of you, develops well-formed maturity in you. That's the kingdom difference. That is an engaged kingdom citizen who is aware of God and self and the world around them, of the culture that is just luring them into another way. And they're saying, no, Father, I choose your way. John 14:21, whoever has my commands and keeps them, he is the one who loves me. And so we declare our love from the pulpit, from the stage, from the workplaces of the ministries that we're involved with, and yet in the private quiet of our own lives, something else is taking place. And the first habit that I want to invite you in here today is the habit of love. Brady, I don't know if you know this, a long time ago, you and I are having a conversation around love, which we've had many. And Brady, I don't know if it was yours or a definition you had come across from somewhere else, but it is this, that I choose to extend myself for your highest good. That is the kingdom expression of love. I choose effort, energy, output for your highest good. And it's foundation to who, and even more importantly, whose I am. I am his. I am his image bearer. I have the deep privilege of being a son of the King. That is what you and I bring to those around us. That is the call. That is the position. Now what's interesting is that we all will likely know this quite well. And again, read it with me. Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? Jesus replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest command. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. So my question is this. Jesus said, everything hangs on these two things. Everything. So my question then, how big is this? How big is that? What thought, what activity, what emotion is not underneath the purview of the great commandment? Interesting, isn't it? If I could take your thought life for the last 24 hours and had a recording and show it on the screen, would you want me to do that? Interesting, isn't it? No show of hands, please. I don't have the actual numbers. I need to find the story. But a speaker, and I think it was at a youth pastors conference, went to the hotel desk of where the whole hotel had been booked out for this youth group of youth pastors, many of them, hundreds. And he went to the front desk and said, I do not want to know any information, who, rooms, etc. But what percentage booked X-rated movies last night? What percentage do you think the number was? It was over 90%. Houston, we have a problem. With my 4 guys, we have a WhatsApp, 5 dudes. My 2 sons and my 2 son-in-laws. And we're staying close in this one together as men. Because we must. Because it'll have our lunch. And women, trust me, the stats are not in favor for the females in our culture either. All is a big word, folks. Really, really big word. And we need to understand, am I fixing my attention on the structure and the beauty and the syntax of the scriptures? Little W word. Or is my heart captivated with the big W word? John 1, right? In the beginning was the... Is that a little W or big W? Who has captured my heart? And if I'm not careful, it's what has captured my heart. So as I think about it, am I seeing through the structures into the vineyard and finding the vine dresser? Allowing him in John 15 to prune me. Oh, we do not like that. I so don't like that. Knowing full well that there's parts of Pete Kuehni, Pete, sorry, that's going to get burned. And then other parts that he just longs to be even more fruitful. Okay, Father. And that was my story in 98. And I had to decide what I was going to do there. So what's the question for you? How are you doing in the habit of love? Just take a minute. If you have a pen, make a mark. I'm not going to ask you to share it. I'm inviting you for some brief, honest reflection. How are you doing? Because if we do not get this one, what does it say in 1 John? If we don't have love, nothing else matters. So it starts with this. So the first habit is what? The habit of? If I want to go to the distance, I need the habit of? All together now. And I'm doing this because I want you to remember these. I want you to remember these. So the first habit is the habit of love. The second one is the habit of rest. How many people would like to have a little bit more rest? This one is probably my biggest challenge. This one and the next one. These ones, the seduction of my own, which is what God really nailed me in 1998, my own self-sufficiency, my capacity to get things done, the accolades of others. Henry Nouwen, in his book, In the Name of Jesus, Reflections on Christian Leadership, he talks about the three temptations of Jesus around the seduction of relevance and significance and power. And Pete Kuehni was all over relevance and significance. I wasn't really tempted by power, but they saw me. Wow. Did you see who saw me? Was even probably the more accurate question. True confessions. And so as I come into this here, we need to decide how we want to do that. Do we want to amuse ourselves? Now, I'm not a big fan of entertainment parks, but I happen to frequent them with my kids over the years from time to time. It just wasn't my thing. But when we take a look at it culturally, if you see the word amuse, what's the activity muse? What does that mean? To think, to ponder, to consider, right? If I put the word a in front, to not think. So if I go to amuse myself, then I'm not thinking. Interesting, isn't it? If I go to recreate, what's the root? Create. Recreate. I must take a time out to do that. I must create space to do that. And this has been a nasty piece for me. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me. And you'll learn how to live freely and lightly. Sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? And yet the patterns in our lives, how we practically live this out, we get the concept. But what does it look like for you and I to move from doing devotions to experiencing devotion? And the shift is monumental. The shift is monumental. I have a group of business owners that I'm with this afternoon, so unfortunately I cannot stay. Once a month we have a face-to-face meeting amongst other activities with this group. And we're spending 6 months on this piece and some of the other habits to help get this ingrained into their lives. Because if they do not get these habits in place, the rest of the activity, although good, is left wanting. And they'll burn out. How's your rest? How many hours a week does the average American watch? I couldn't find really good, helpful stats. These are Nielsen ratings. The average American watches how many hours of TV per week? This is not screen time. 35. Per week. And I go, how is that? That in some circles, that's a work week. Now, I'm looking over the audience here, and how many people are over 30? Right? When you hit over 60, the numbers are around 60 to 65 hours a week. Now, that's not my purpose for today, but I do feel God's nudge over time. I'm going to be speaking about retirement at some point soon. Not because I'm going to retire, but there's a message our world needs around that. And I know I'm going to be speaking about that. There's a seduction that has happened around that is not the kingdom way. How is it that our retired people are investing 60 to 65 hours a week watching? And that's not computer time or tablet time. That's screen time in front of the TV. How is that possible? I look at that and I go, Jeremiah 6 is pretty clear. This is what the Lord says. Stand at the crossroads and look for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is and walk in it, and you'll find rest for your soul. So I suggest, and this is my hypothesis, my opinion, that we are self-medicating our pain. Look at the stress numbers. Think about it. How often have you said it? No hands here. I just need to go home and veg. Check out. Now, there's nothing wrong. This is not an anti-TV commentary. But there's something fundamentally wrong in our approach. Would you agree? Look at the stats. Look at the facts. Look at the social norms that are out there. How are we conforming or not conforming any longer to the pattern of this world? Psalm 63, you, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. This afternoon, I'm doing a bit of a workshop on the difference between alone and feeling lonely. And they are profoundly different. One is a physical reality that in our leadership, we are often alone. Nobody can carry the weight that as an owner that I must carry in a business. Nobody else can do that for me. But the emotional response is a legitimate one in being human. I just need to decide where I'm going to go to have it met. Will I take that sense of feeling lonely and move it over into 35 to 60 hours a week and try to have it satisfied there? Or maybe in the world of many men that I know, into the world of pornography? Or am I trying to saturate that need with extra relationships that are just shallow but not meaningful? How am I meeting this place? Am I willing to bring that to the one who made me? If your outflow is greater than your inflow, your upkeep will be your downfall. Are you caring for your soul? Are you finding rest for your soul? A couple of quick stories. New client, business owner. And because of distance, we're using FaceTime. And very self-declared Christ follower, eager to grow in Christ. And I said, you know what, let's read John 15 together. John verses 1 through 17. And so I said his name. I said, why don't you read it first? Great, thanks. And as he did that, he read it, and it's like in John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And I said, okay. I let him read it, and I said, would you mind if I read it again? And I shared a story about how I was with about 12 young men in their 20s a number of years ago. And we're reading a psalm. And I had them do the same thing, and it gave very much a similar rote response. And then I called them, I just said, guys, okay, time out. I said, I want to invite you, let's read it differently. And I took the scriptures and I went onto the floor on my face. And I said, Jesus, meet us. And I read the psalm. And when my head came up, 12 young men on the floor and their faces around me. And God moved. So I read John 15 and I put his name into the text. And I looked up and he was just crying. Screen to screen we were. And he looks up at me and through the tears he goes, I want that. He provides a referral to another close friend of his who owns another business. I sit on his deck, one of our very first meetings. And I said, you know what, why don't we read John 15 together? And I had him read it, and the patterns become clear. And as he read it, at the end, just as graciously as I could, I said, would you mind if I read it again? And I did the same thing. And when I finished, I looked up, and he was just broke. And he said to me, quote unquote, I want that. The hunger of the people around us as ministers of the gospel, they want to know that it's true. Is it real? They're just longing. And if it's not real in here, I can't export what I have not imported. Is it real for you? How's your rest? Take a quick moment. The last three go quick. How is your rest? First habit, habit of. Second habit, habit of. Third habit is the habit of yes and no. We live in a world of a multitude of choices, and it confuses every one of us. Would you agree? Toothpaste, go buy toothpaste. Oh my gosh. Go buy juice. Oh my gosh. I want gum. Okay, now, how do you buy gum anymore? Choice is overwhelming us. We feel the compression of time. Jim, how many hours in a week do you have? Ken gave us the answer earlier. 168. We have 168 hours in a week. And so we must juggle, shouldn't we? Isn't that how we get everything done? And that was the demise of my world. And that's still the temptation of this day, to add more to Pete's plate. Because you know what? I'm a really talented guy. I got a lot of skill. I can make it all happen until it all comes crashing down. I am convinced that we need to be way more like Jesus and bring focus to our lives on the things he is calling us to do and to be. And without that intimacy, that solitude with him, I will not hear his voice around these things. I cannot. The clamor in my head is too much. And so I'm running hard, running on empty. I have not replenished my soul. I cannot hear the voice of the one who loves me. So in the world of 168, I started to ask the question, well, how did Jesus do it? I am convinced there's not a person ever who has lived that had a larger, bigger, more demanding mandate. Ever. And yet he had the audacity in the garden the night before the cross to give this statement, Father, I brought glory to your name by completing the work you gave me to do. So what question comes out of that? What work have you given me to do? Then I said, well, what did that practically look like? I go to Mark chapter 1. Jesus just finished healing, and Peter and Andrew's mom and all the story around that. He heals, he teaches, and then the guys, they pull him away. They probably had some fish, late evening dinner. And then we have the quiet time verse that we all like to quote, right? Jesus got up early in the morning, went into the hills too. Now, here's what's fascinating. If you look at the text right after that. The disciples said, hey, Jesus, you know what? There's so much left undone from yesterday. The people are still waiting. Can you come back and finish up what you did yesterday? He doesn't even, now, who knows what the bigger commentary was in that moment. But in the text, Jesus says, you know what? That's where I'm going to go preach today. And he goes. And yet we have the compulsion in our culture to fix everybody, to meet everybody's needs, and it's wearing us out. And we are not called to do it. The only way we can understand what to do is to hear the Father's voice and do the work that he has called me, Pete Kuehni, you, to do. We need to become knife throwers. Precise, full of grace and truth. Forget about juggling. Be clear in what he's called you to do and do that. Do that. Pete, love your wife. Do that. Pete, mentor, love, be a dad to your kids. 8 grandchildren. Business owner. Yeah, I need 8 knives for that one. Clarity, focus. I'm not called to do it all. How are you doing on the habit of yes and no? Take a few seconds. First habit, habit of. Love. Second habit. Yes. Third habit. Yes. Fourth habit is the habit of generations. One of the most energizing things that has kept me engaged over time is the investment in other people. The beauty, the gift, the privilege of coming alongside somebody else. And my top 3 gifts, outreach or evangelism, leadership and teaching. I love mucking it up with those who don't know Jesus. It's my favorite space. Starbucks, downtown Guelph, I have stories of guys coming to kingdom in the store. I write a blog every week. And my friends who are not yet Christ followers, they want to be on that. 2 of them have come into the kingdom through the blog. And I go, Father, you have a great sense of humor. Because I'm writing very clearly to the business community around being the men and women that God has called us to be. So are you generational thinking? I look at the scriptures, and they are filled with the mindset of the kingdom citizen that we are to think generations. Would you agree? I can't escape it. The Great Commission is unforgiving. Invest yourselves. Teaching to obey the Father. When my son was 15, quick story. I had a group of 4 business guys that I had pulled together, not Christ followers, and we sat together for about 18 months exploring what does it mean to live a full life. What does it look like? The first meeting, flip chart of 3 pages of questions. As I'm doing it, so Father, I have no idea where this is going to go, but you do. Over the course of the 18 months, one of the 4 did become a Christ follower. 15 years later now, another one has entered into the kingdom. Don't know where the other 2 are at. But in that process, one of the nights as they were leaving, my son Jay was sitting at the head of the stairs, 15 years old, and I look up at about 10:30 at night, and I look up and say, Jay, what are you doing up? He goes, Dad, I listen every Tuesday night. And then he said this, would you do that for my friends? And I said, no, I didn't. And so I said, Jay, you know what? You invite your friends, and Mom and I will lead it together. And we helped him cultivate his leadership gift as part of that process. He invited 12 of his friends, 6 who had some church affiliation, and 6 not. And in that group of 12 was this little pixie of a girl named Cassie, who's now the mother of 3 of my grandsons. A beautiful disciple-making woman. We don't know. When we think generations, we think it's something we have to orchestrate. And it's not. Our job is to abide with the Father. And He's at work. Our job is to hear where He's at work in our context. And then have the courage to follow what He's doing. I didn't design Jay to sit there. But oh, the fruit is wonderful, let me tell you that. Our King is at work. Are you aligning your life so you can hear His voice? Are the habits such that you can participate in this grand adventure? Now, trust me, I get hired to do strategic plans. There was no strategic plan here other than obeying my Father to think generationally and to invest in good men and women. How are you doing in the habit of generations? Where is that in your spectrum? Is it a strategy or a life? Are you intentional or are you obligational? How are you doing? And the last one, very quickly. First 4, habit of, habit of, habit of, habit of, habit of community. I have bookended it with love, and then one of the worst seductions in Pete Kuehni's life is the seduction, and it still haunts me, that I can do this alone. And I need my friends. I need men and women who are willing to call me on it. Because I have blind spots every corner in my life. I am just woefully saddened when I see the craving for likes on our social media. It is a commentary of our times. It's a seduction of our times that we think that somehow that represents community. In the business world, we tout community all the time, but it's shallow and lacks meaning and lacks intent. And done well, accountability. We need to bear one another's burdens. We need to consider how we can spur one another on, because I need a little help from my friends. Yes. And these are just a few. And people say, well, how have you found these friends? Our daughter, her language has been, I needed to learn how to be a friend to have friends. Many of us crave mentors. You see the name Esther. She lives in Nairobi half the time and in Colorado Springs half the time. And I was at a session where I was leading a bunch of workshops. Things were going south in terms of the leadership work at the Navigators in Canada. It was a tough time in our journey. Esther was there on the international executive team to provide support. I saw her and I could feel, oh God, I want to spend more time with this lady. So I went and asked her, Esther, would you invest, like she's about 10 years our senior, would you mind investing in Kathy and me? We've not been here before. And she said, yes. So once a quarter, we connect. In August, we're going to meet in Chicago for a couple of days. And she's pouring into us. And we're just, because we wanted to learn, God, what are you doing globally? Help us see what you're doing in your work. So she's mentoring us in that space. Who's mentoring you? Who's helping you? Who knows the dark side of your world? Have you asked for a little help from your friends? Who's in your corner? How's your habit of community? So what's the first habit? Second? Third? Fourth? Last? Ladies and gentlemen, my prayer for you as you minister, thank you for doing the beautiful work that you do, for giving of yourselves. Thank you for being a part of the ministry of the gospel and the advance of his kingdom. Thank you. Don't do it alone. Engage in these 5 habits. Allow the King to infuse you with his purposes as you meet with him, as you think about these. God bless you today. Thank you.